Hello everyone. We are here with Jacob Wolf, and very nice to see you here at the interview. Thank you so much for coming to this interview. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, my name is Jacob Wolf. I'm an investigative journalist. I am the chief reporter and investigative lead at Esports, which what that fancy title means is I lead our investigative department. So I have a staff of full-timers, contractors, and part-timers who work for my staff or work on my staff, and I'm a part of sort of editorial management for Esports. Esports is I believe the second most read esports website in the West. We do more than on a good month, more than 14 million monthly active users. So more than 14 million people read our website. We are second, to my knowledge, only behind Xerto, who I think cover things a little differently. They focus a lot on like Twitch streamer influencer culture and things like that. We focus really on sort of the hardcore day-to-day of esports. So we're constantly covering everything. I like to call us sort of like the esports Reader's Digest. We do a good job of like if something happened in esports today, good chance we probably wrote about it. So boot up our website, you can kind of find whatever's going on. I am also the founder and executive producer of a company called Overcome. Overcome is a full service audio and video production company. So I am working on my first contract now, which is a investigative podcast that will come out next year in 2022. I can't dive super into deep about what it's on while it's in production, but the short of it is it's going to be 8 episodes, and it's going to cover one big topic across all 8 episodes and sort of tell the story of this one big scandal in esports as a fully audio podcast. So before that I worked for before coming back to Esports and founding Overcome, I worked at ESPN. ESPN is the largest sports media company in the United States, probably in all of North America, bigger than others, but very relevant in the US. They have media rights to the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, and a bunch of other things. They are a machine, a multi-thousand employee machine. I worked there for 4.5 years as the reporter in their esports department. I started as essentially, I replaced employee number 3. So there were 3 of us at one point, and we eventually grew to 11. The end of my time there, I've been pretty outspoken. I wasn't particularly happy, but I ended up wanting to leave, and kind of something else came first. They laid off our entire department and made my departure a lot easier. And that was end of last year. So I started off sort of on a new leaf of life and career in the beginning of 2021, and so far so good.
So basically, I think people know you for the news on off seasons, right? So like, what do you think about all the drama going on in Europe and niggas from like Twitter and stuff? We just see like coaches and players like kind of baiting each other, having fun kind of back and forth. But from your perspective, like, are those aren't real, right? Like they have like good relationships back in the back, right? That's just like Twitter stuff, right? It's like, I don't know, from the outside it seems like a lot of drama is going on. And like we don't in like Eastern countries, like we don't really know about these things. They would cover it up. So what do you think about like the difference? I guess looking at all the drama going on, it's kind of interesting from an Eastern side point of view.
Yeah, a couple things there. I think so. Not everyone likes each other. It's not all fake. Some of it is. But I if you see like G2 and Fnatic like bickering on social media, those people don't like each other. It's pretty well documented. They don't get along. But a lot of it's like supposed to be funny. I honestly, I compare so much of the online conversation around this time of year to like professional wrestling. And like how people in professional wrestling like will say a bunch of stuff to their opponent or whatever, their rival on the screen, but then like backstage they're like giving each other hugs and like shaking hands, like super happy about like how well they sold it, right? They made it look real. Honestly, it's the same thing. Okay. I'm a professional wrestling nerd. I like to watch it. So but Yeah, so I think it's a lot like that. The other part of that, the reason I think there's so much, um, the reason I think there's so much sort of attention and excitement around this offseason, there are more people reporting on the offseason this year than I think any year before,
Hmm.
especially in the West. And I think that that's really exciting. Um, I've wanted for a long time to see other people reporting on roster moves because honestly, it's not something I don't think of it as my identity. I know a lot of people know me for that. I know that a lot of people know that's the type of work I've done. But I do so much the other 11 months of the year other than
Yeah.
November. And like, that's what really matters to me.
Uh,
I wrote a piece this year about, he's a man now, but was a boy at this time when I started following him, who tried to scam people in esports out of $42 million. He was like writing fake checks and all sorts of other things. And I kept up with this guy for 3.5 years and like checked out what he was doing. He's in jail now. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison recently. He's 21, so he'll get out around 30. And stuff like that to me is far more interesting than like this player goes to that team. I really like, reading contracts, sort of getting into the weeds of documents and like figuring out what's the story here. That's how I see myself. I know a lot of people see myself strictly roster moves, and it's fun. It's exciting. Producing the show like we had on Monday is exciting. I like putting those things together, but yeah, I think of myself maybe a little bit differently than the public does.
do you ever get like threats or like from people because of the investigative work that you've done? And how do you deal with it?
Mhm. Yeah, they're not always exactly implicit. You'll have what we would call in the West like microaggressions, like somebody sort of says something to you, or they say it in a way, or in person they posture in a way, they position their body in a way that you can tell like they're trying to intimidate you almost. Um, I have had some of those even this week, and I like it's kind of whatever to me, to be
Uh,
honest. I have a pretty thick skin now, but I didn't always. It was definitely hard to deal with in the past. But I feel like I'm in a good spot now.
and the more legit you get, you need like higher bodyguard for yourself. Like when you have
Yeah,
like a lot of like, yeah.
that's
Um,
true.
so like there's a fake account of you,
Hmm.
the evil Jacob Wolf, right? What is
Yeah.
your opinion of him?
I think he's funny. Uh, I've talked to him a few times. I don't know where he's from. So I've tried to deduce this a little bit actually. So he speaks German, but I don't think he's German because he messaged me and was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry you couldn't come to Worlds because we could have met up." Meaning he lives in Iceland. So I'm really confused. Like, is he a German guy that lives in Iceland? Like, what's the move here? But I think he's hilarious, honestly. Like, I find him really funny. Um, I think it's funny when people like get baited by him because like it's just clearly like it's so obvious, right? Like they don't even click the link. They click the
Yeah,
link and it goes to a funny page.
yeah,
Like, do you not understand? Like people just don't like. It shows you kind of how the term for it is like news literacy, like when you're
yeah,
able to like read something and tell if it's real or fake.
yeah,
Are you news literate? Not many people are news literate in
yeah.
Western culture, I don't think. So they get baited by stuff like that.
Oh yeah, in Chinese in China, actually, a lot of people actually think he's you because like they don't really
That's funny.
know. They don't really know how to recognize you. Like they don't read English that well or something. Some of them like don't know that you're
Oh,
different. So it's really funny when
we're
they
not the same person.
anyway. Okay. But okay, so actually my first question is so how do you like when you get a news, like what is the process that you have to go through to make sure it's legit? And do you ever talk to like what is the process from getting the news and releasing it
Sure.
for you?
Depends on what it is. Every story is a little different. For example, today I reported on Activision Blizzard. They're currently under fire for sexual misconduct. They're being sued by a labor division of the California government. Then today, earlier this morning in America, They put out, or the Wall Street Journal, big, Western publication based in New York, put out a article about their CEO and how much he knew over all these years about what was going on, right? He claims sort of that he didn't know about a lot of this. The Wall Street Journal contradicts that with their reporting. I was told this morning by an employee that yesterday, Monday, today's Tuesday, they were granted additional time off, like paid time off for next week during Thanksgiving. They basically are closing their offices for all of next week until after the Thanksgiving holiday, which is next Thursday. So, the following Monday, basically. And a few people I spoke to thought the timing was suspicious. That it was the day before like a big article comes out about like how bad things are. So in that case, it's, I need to talk to multiple people, and I need to make sure that the one person that calls me and tells me that they're not lying, they're not trying to put a spin on it, but like, that it matches up, that other people have, in this case, the same email, was what we were looking for. So, that's, and then at that point, it's about reaching out to like who we're reporting on for comment. I did email Activision Blizzard before that story went out. I actually got an email follow up afterwards, not during. The article went out before they got back to me. But that's really it. I mean, making sure that people, it sounds easy. It's not always easy because you have to make sure you have those relationships and that trust. But it's about making sure multiple people who don't necessarily talk to each other, don't know each other, easier in big companies, right? Because a lot of people work there. But that multiple people that don't necessarily have the same interests, that you're talking to them, and you're hearing the same thing. And if you're not, figure out why you're not hearing the same thing. Is it just untrue? Is somebody like trying to, kind of spin the situation to look better? All of that, you have to really like deduce where the information is coming from and why. And that's really a big part of my job.
Wow. How many sources is there like a set number of sources that you have to like reach, like 3 or 4, to make sure something is like maybe legit?
I think the bare minimum is 2. It's a little bit easier when it's, I always go with 2, but it's just generally easier when there's a document or an email or whatever, right? Because if you get a copy of it, you just verify it's legitimate, that you have, or if it's a public document. Really just need 1 if you're able to like pull it from wherever it comes, a court or whatever it may be. So usually minimum is 2, depending on the type of story, the veracity of the story, sort of like what I'm writing about. I like to have more than that, like usually 3, 4, 5 at least. And then also just depends on like as well, it's also about who the sources are. Like if you think about it this way, if you have 2 people that talk to each other and they talk to each other because you've asked, or you just observe, right? Maybe they're like tweeting at each other or whatever else. You notice that they interact with each other on a regular basis, or they work in the same department at a certain company. The chances that they talk to each other are pretty high. Well, then really you only have 1 source, because those 2 people are probably sharing information amongst each other and then sharing it with you. That actually happens a lot. And you have to be really careful as a reporter, because that's the easiest way to publish something that's wrong, is when you have multiple sources, but they're talking, you're all talking to the same people. So that's the most difficult part. You got to make sure you're getting like sort of a well-rounded amount of information.
Is it the same with rosters? Like the way you check those sources, you have to like talk to like 2, 3 different people.
Yep. Especially in the cases of like things like buyouts, you need to get an understanding of like how many people are, like where the information is coming from, how close is the source to the information, because they're not always super close. Like you have to think about, how do they know this, right? Like how do they know this piece of information? Are they the one that's signing a contract? Are they the ones reviewing a contract, whatever it may be? Or do they like know somebody who knows somebody, right? Like how close are they to the actual flow of information? That's really important.
I actually started to think, I'm just guessing that like esports bosses would just go to you for their roster change and to tell you before they announced it at this point, because you're like almost 100% right every single time, right? So is my guess right?
Uh, I very rarely have people come to me.
Oh,
Usually, I make a lot of phone calls, and
okay.
I can be, I would like to say diligent. I'm sure they view it as annoying sometimes, but I mean, I call a lot of people.
Oh,
That was last night during the show, Monday night during the show. I was on the phone a lot.
oh,
I prefer to call people than text as well. It's way easier to, you know, I'll pull out a notepad and start,
uh,
writing while I'm on the phone with them or whatever.
uh. And
So
you just
yeah,
don't
it's
leave like traces or get like screenshots leaking out, right?
well,
No.
exactly. Yeah, not every source wants to be known they're talking to you.
Oh,
Hence why things like WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram are important because all those are encrypted.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
getting the information, somebody else getting the information is pretty difficult.
You're going back like typing like in the military.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
I've
fun.
I've dealt with some really sensitive situations before where I mean those apps are really important. Like I don't know, somebody signed a non-disclosure agreement. They're not supposed to be talking to me, but they like are compelled morally, or if it's something bad, like compelled morally to talk to
Wow.
me about it, right? Well, then how am I going to talk to them without them getting in trouble? Basically,
Wow, your
happens a
job's
lot.
so cool. I didn't know
Thank
that
you.
your job is so cool. Anyways, okay. So during the off season, what kind of role do you view yourself as? Like you said, maybe like reveal the truth behind, or if some like deal is like there's like secrets behind the deal, or the players are not getting treated fairly. Like what kind of stand do you think you are in the off season process compared to like bosses and players and everything? Like if you want to like,
Yeah, I think a lot of what you see is, if we were to use like descriptors, a lot of what's out there is the what happened, right? X player moved to Y team, or this team and this team are disagreeing over something. You hear a lot of the what is happening. You don't hear how much of the why something is happening and the how something is happening. And the more I've continued to do my work, that's the questions I want answered, right? How is something happening? Like, how long is the contract? How much is the money, right? Like, how much money are we talking about? In the case of, I or the why, like of why something is happening. I did a story recently about perks, and there was a clause in G2 and
yeah, yeah.
C9's buyout that prohibited Cloud9 from reselling his contract to Fnatic for 3 years. Super important, in my opinion, especially that it got elevated to Riot. And my story compelled Riot to put out a statement and outlaw that rule. Or at least I believe they were going to outlaw it anyway, but it made them talk about it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have otherwise. Without that
Yeah,
story, it would have
yeah,
just,
yeah.
nope, never happened, and move on,
Yeah, yeah.
And so I see my role as like trying to provide a lot more greater context. I think there are a lot of fans who are very rabid, and all they want to hear is the what's happening, who's going to my favorite team, whether it be Cloud9 or FlyQuest or Dignitas or Fnatic or G2 or
Right.
any of the teams, like who's going to my favorite team, and that's all they care about. I think there's a subsection of the fan base though that is really interested in why are they going there? What is the decision making like? Why are what's the process like? And I think I've been trying to do more of that the older I've gotten in my career, and I've been trying to encourage my staff too, Bloop and others, to do that as well.
Very cool. So I recall like you don't want to talk about how the Rocks Tigers, right? Because
I think about it now. That story was published in between the quarterfinals and the semifinals before they went and played SKT in New York. And I think and maybe this is just me being selfish, but I think it adds color to the situation in terms of people, I know they like very vehemently denied my reporting, and frankly, they lied about it, right? They were dishonest. But I think that there were people that believed me. I think for the people that did believe me, it made it all more special. This is one of the best teams at the time, one of the best teams in the world playing, and this is their last chance together. And to me, that makes it so much more special that they did it. You know, like obviously they lost to SKT, and we got a SKT Samsung final in Los Angeles. But like, if I had to do it over again, I would do the same thing. I don't have a lot of regrets in that situation. I've talked about this a little bit, so I don't mind sharing more. But like, I got kicked out of the venue in Chicago while reporting on that story during quarterfinals because I knew about the story probably about 5 weeks before it happened or before it came out. So before Worlds, and I knew I would be going to Worlds, and I wanted to have a conversation with people at the Rockstaggers and let them know I think it's kind of the one we're having now. I think this is important to be out there. I want to be respectful to you, right? Like to them in that case, and have a conversation with them before. And so that's what part of why I was going to Chicago. I was going to cover the event, but I was also going to try to speak to them and just be level with them. I wanted to have that conversation with their manager at the time. As far as I understood, she was in Chicago. But I couldn't get direct access to her without going through Riot. And I asked Riot if they could set up that conversation. I explained to Riot what I knew. And Riot came to me and told me, okay, well, you can have a statement about this, but you have to hold the story until after Worlds. And my answer was no. And I said, I would like to speak with her. And they told me she's not here. Well, I knew she was there. I knew she was in Chicago. They were lying to me. So I got very aggressive with Riot, to be frank. Like I was very angry because I don't like being lied to. And Rox wins their quarterfinal match. Everyone in the press room gets interviews except me, unsurprisingly. And we're upstairs in the venue of the Chicago Theater. And I see Gorilla. My recorder is in my pocket. It's not on. And I went up to him and I had like an off the record conversation. I didn't record him. I basically just said hello. I introduced myself. I said, he knew Fionn, and I was like, I'm Fionn's colleague. We work together. I'm looking for your manager. Can you please point me in her direction? I would like to speak with her. And a Riot person ran across the venue and grabbed me and kicked me out of the venue. The following day, I was allowed to. I don't really even think I went. I was definitely not allowed to be in the press room, even if I attended. And HUK won that night in the quarters, following night. And thankfully, there were some people at HUK that were kind enough to allow me to interview for Given and Vander outside. But I was not allowed to come back in. And I was told I wasn't planning to go to the New York leg. I was actually going to another event in Atlanta, a Counter-Strike event. And then I was going to LA for World's Finals. And I was told I would not be allowed in the press box for either New York or LA. I actually had a lot more fun time generally in LA than I would have in the press box. For those unfamiliar with the Staples Center, I was the press seating is at the highest point of the venue, so it's what Americans would call the nosebleeds because you're so high up it makes you like feel like you're struggling to breathe. That's where the press section is. I was actually invited to go to the Los Angeles Lakers ownership suite that was being rented out at the time by Axiomatic, who now own Team Liquid. So they had just bought Team Liquid a few months earlier, and they were hosting a bunch of people there, and I got to go there and interview Bruce Stein and Peter Guber, who were a part of their board, and get to sort of meet a bunch of people in the industry, like the people that came through that door. C9 Jack was there, Team Liquid, Steve Aronset, TSM Reginald, G2 Ocelot, Carlos. And I got to like, I didn't record any of this. I just got to have a conversation, a very basic off the record conversation. I had a much better time doing that than I did actually, being in the press box and having to cover T1's win, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing story. Okay, let's see. So you have really good really good relationship with all the bosses, even though like you leak all these stuff, right? How do they look at your leaks and stuff?
Definitely some of them get angry. Leading up to franchising in the LCS a few years ago, I made it a point to as many as possible. I went to LA for a week, the week before Riot decided. I thought it was the week they were going to decide, but the week before they decided they were gonna who they were gonna choose. I stayed there, and I ended up trying to get like lunch or coffee or dinner with as many people as possible in the industry, especially that works on the teams and the teams I thought would make the franchising cut. And I tried to explain to as many of them as possible about what I do and why I do it. And, like people may not remember, but because now they think it's funny. Like a lot of people react to a lot of these owners react to the leaks and they make a joke out of it, to your point earlier. People probably don't remember how hostile some of them used to be. They used to be really mean to reporters and call us liars publicly and all sorts of, like, the behavior was really ill. And they spoke very ill of us as a profession. And I tried to level with these people and understand, look, you have a job to do. Your job is to sign players, to manage your business, whatever it may be, run a successful team. My job is to be a reporter and cover what you do. Sometimes it's not great. Sometimes some of the stuff you do isn't great, and I'm going to write about it. But at the same time, like, we need to have a professional working relationship here. And if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it.
Wow.
And I think that has it's been for the better. I have better relationships now because of conversations like those, and I have them all the time. I was interviewing somebody this morning who just made a simple pass that they didn't mean to, but asked me to do something kind of unethical, and I was just like, hey, and I just like stopped them, and I was just like, hey, I'm not doing that, and here's why. Let me explain to you why this is a bad thing. This one, somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, and I was just like, I can't do that, and you should not ask other reporters to do that because it's not okay. So just kind of stopping it.
I wish I had half your courage. Like, I think
thanks.
You're like very morally upright and stuff, and I think you're really good at like telling people about your standard. But I get like nervous when I really believe in something. I want to stand up to that. When I talk to these people, I really need to learn from you.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but I think it's really important. I take it really seriously.
So that is what you think that makes your work worthwhile, right? Revealing the truth that is underneath the industry where people don't want to talk about.
Yeah, it's a lot of journalism in games more generally, not just esports, but video gaming, tends to be very almost an extension of PR. Like, it's public relations, and very favorable to a lot of these game publishers. Think of how many, especially if you're in the Western audience, think of how many stories, positive stories, you've read about Activision Blizzard and Riot Games and others, all after all these years. Meanwhile, while women at those companies were being abused, probably a lot more about how great these people were. Meanwhile, the people that work for them are having a really difficult time in the workplace. And then there's the one big article, whether it be from the Wall Street Journal or Kotaku or whomever it may be, that the DFEH lawsuit, and you're like, wow, where was all this? Well, I mean, that's because a lot of the journalism can be quite fluffy. Like, if you're, the hardest part in cases like those has just been getting people willing to talk about it. But it's not like, it's not a secret. I can tell you that many of the games journalists who write game reviews know that kind of stuff about companies. It's just about, building the relationship to get someone to speak about it. And yeah, I take it really seriously because I think it's really important. I think that people covering sort of more Generation Z focused topics or millennial focused topics, video gaming being one of them, that sort of caters to that audience. They're very short term. I think a lot of the journalists tend to be very short term, and they want the immediate gratification of like getting a story that gets a lot of clicks, and not the hours and hours and hours it takes of work with one person to like make one person comfortable speaking with you, because it does take that time. You have to talk to people for a long time just to get one thing, and you have to build those relationships and that trust, and it's difficult, it's hard, it's time, it like takes a lot of time. And I just think a lot of people are not willing to put in that time, to be honest.
Thank you for sharing about like your experiences.
Thank you.
So what are some positive or negative reactions from the public that you received? Like, can you give us some like examples and how you deal with them?
Yeah. During the Rocks Tigers fiasco that we were talking about earlier, people got really serious with me. So I, at one point, I had someone find my old apartment address. I was living in Connecticut at the time, but they found my Texas address from my old apartment, and threatened to publish it. At one point, someone did an IP lookup on me on Skype and tried to do a DDoS of my home internet. And I can tell you those things are a little scary. It makes me very heightened, as sort of be on high alert a lot of the time. You know, one thing about me, and I know we've not really talked a lot about my background as a human being. I've been a public figure since I was 17 years old. That is really difficult. To tell you, like I go out to a bar and am perfectly behaved, and I'm worried about getting drunk. Just because like in a normal casual setting, like not doing anything wrong, just getting drunk and someone taking out a phone and taking a picture of me makes me paranoid, because like I know how people are, and I know that it's the one small thing of public embarrassment, and that's everything. You know, I'm done. And so I had to be like on my absolute best behavior, buttoned up, and it's difficult, and you know, the internet doesn't make it much easier. So it's hard. I would say that's a lot of the negative. The positive side of things, I think there are a lot of people appreciative for what I do, and I hear it a lot. You know, even in times where it's not perfect. Our show had technical difficulties that made me very frustrated. That said, I think people appreciated the content of the show. I've heard a lot of positive feedback about it, and I appreciate when people say that, because usually the negatives are the loudest. There are more people who think positively about things on the internet, especially places like Reddit or Twitter or, you know, whatever social media it's on. The negative speakers like to talk more, and the positive people just like enjoy the content and then move on with their day. Right? They don't say anything. They're just like, oh, I like that. Let me go on with what I was doing. And so it's hard. So when people, you know, reach out to me privately or even publicly, and they're like, you know, I really like what you're doing, thank you for doing it, it does mean a lot.
You know, from talking to you, I think we met last time we met was 2000, is it 18 or
18?
Okay.
South Korea. Yep.
I just feel like you grew up, like you matured so much just from like I think all these experiences doing the same job and everything. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been 3 years. It feels like it's been 10, to be honest.
But you still look energetic and very interested in your job, and that's great.
Thank you.
What are some things that people might not know that you have to go through day to day in your job? Like we look at the stuff that you report and stuff. Like you said, you have to do a lot of house and all that. Do you want to share some of those things that people don't see that you have to work through?
Yeah, it really, the big thing for me this year has been like I've never been a manager before, and so it's been like really interesting to learn how to talk to people, and understand and empathize where people are coming from. Not everyone is the same person. You have to manage everyone differently. That's been something I've had to learn a lot this year. It's part of what I knew I was going to have to do. I'm excited to do it. I care really deeply about improving other journalist careers and helping them be successful, other than just myself, because I want the industry as a whole to be better. And so if I can work with, I don't know, 5 people and make them better just a little bit, that means a lot to me. So, I do a lot of that. But also, I've written less this year in 2021 than I have ever in my career. And I'm more proud of this year than I was of 2019 or 2020, to be honest, just because I felt like what I was writing, the type of content I was doing in 2019 and 2020. Can I curse here? Is that okay? Can I say the actual word that just came to my mouth? A lot of the work I did in 2019 and 2020, other than like the show and a few other things, a lot of it was bullshit. And it made me feel really bad about my job. It made me very displeased with what I was doing. I was working for people at ESPN those last 2 years that I don't think understood like where I was coming from, and what I cared deeply and was passionate about. I don't think they also understood what it means to be a part of changing an industry, growing an industry. A lot of them are journalists who went to journalism school, came out, and they're a part of the sports industry, baseball, football, basketball, that has existed for a period of time. They weren't the people, very few of them were the people that sort of grew with the industry. And, as the industry got bigger and bigger and bigger, they were along for the ride and they were a part of that growth. I don't think they understood that at all. I don't think they understood what it meant to me to be bigger than myself and be bigger than their, how they make money or how they want to make money. To me, I take it very seriously. I'm a part of an industry that is growing. I want to be here to help it grow by doing all the things I do every day. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. There are a lot of things that just, aren't exactly apparent that people don't see all the time in my work. But it's constant. Like just because I'm writing less doesn't mean I'm doing less work. I'm actually doing more work. But it's just really exciting. A lot of it's behind the scenes, and that's okay.
Compared to when you first started in the industry, how would you compare your job, the difference in your job, or like would you say this job means this to you when you first started and now it means this to you?
Yeah, I think I started from a place of, when I first started getting paid to write about esports, I think I started from a place a lot of people do with that. Oh, wow, I am getting paid to write about video games. How fucking cool is that? And I still feel a lot of that, to be clear. But it sort of just like took me over, like it kind of engulfed everything. I was just excited to be able, like I was a fan, very much still a fan. I was really excited to be able to interview this person, excited to be able to interview this person. I look at it a lot differently now. I am excited to interview people, but not because I'm like losing my shit at being a fan, more so because I am excited to tell a good story or to, be able to give them an interview they've never had before, right? It was somebody that like, I do a lot of research. I ask questions in a way I think that are kind of evoking. I'm not trying to bait people into saying stuff, but I'm trying to get them to talk about things that maybe are not so comfortable and like sort of show who part of who they are. I didn't understand that at the beginning of my career. And there's some really big touch points for me that I look back on as like, that's, what made me really passionate. I did a series of interviews at, I believe Evo 2017 or Evo 2018, Evo, the big fighting game tournament in Las Vegas. And I interviewed some of the best Super Smash Brother players in the world, Hungry Box and Leffen in particular, ones I remember. And I talked to them about subjects that I think they hadn't talked about a lot. I've developed a relationship with Hungry Box as a reporter before. And I wrote a profile on him as well that sort of talked about some of his difficulty as a public person. He's been a public figure for 10 years ish, and talked to him about that. And I'm really proud of the way that I spoke to those guys, because I think I made them think. Not about the game, but about themselves, and talk about themselves in a way that nobody else had before, or at least not frequently. Maybe they're friends, but not a journalist. And then as well, I had a story one of the few things I did in 2019 I'm really proud of so in 2018 I covered the Jacksonville shooting. For those maybe unfamiliar, there was a Madden football game tournament, football simulator tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, and a player from Baltimore, Maryland, drove down to Florida with 2 handguns in his car, and he shot people and killed 2 people. And they're at this tournament on the second day of the tournament. And I went down to Jacksonville a few days after the shooting to do a story with a colleague about what happened. There was one thing that American news media tends to do a lot is they tend to sensationalize, where they take advantage of situations like that and make it and overblow it. In that case, it was video games lead to violence, which is a very common thing. It's a football game, not a shooting game. And so I thought it was really important to get the record straight. What's up with the shooter? What's his background? Like, why did this happen? And it was a series of talking to people, obtaining public documents from courts in Maryland. While I was down there, I met a player. His name is O'Leary. So that was the first year of the NBA 2K League, and he had gone from being a used car salesman in Florida to being a professional NBA 2K player and playing for the affiliate of the Milwaukee Bucks. And he was shot during that. He also played Madden on the side, and he went to the tournament to hang out with some friends. He lives about 4 hours away, so he drove to go spend some time with his friends. And he was shot a total of 4 times, once in the hip, once in the chest, and then twice in his hand, once in his thumb, once in his tip of his middle finger. And I met him while he was in between his first and second hand surgery. I met his mom during a vigil. And he was actually, his story was he was rescued by a Hooters chef. There was a Hooters in the complex where the shooting happened, and the guy rescued him and saved him until an ambulance got there. And they did hand reconstruction surgery on his hand, and I met him in between the first and second one, and they had to do 2 total. And I knew that wasn't the story I was telling when I was down there, but I knew it was the story I wanted to keep up with. So I pitched that story to SportsCenter, the television show on ESPN, and they'll occasionally do these Sunday morning features that a lot of people watch on Sunday morning. Either they don't go to church or before they go to church. And so it's a really an honor to have a story in there. And I pitched it, and it got picked up, and I co-produced that with a set of team of producers on their features team. And I wrote an article about it, and did a lot of reporting on and spent time with him. I went to 5 different locations to spend time with him. And I'm really proud of that. That was a moment in my career that I just remember. Followed that player, and I helped tell his story. And one thing that I'll never forget is something that had happened in the US, I believe the year before, either 1 or 2 years before that, was in Florida, outside of Miami. There was a mass shooting by a former student of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And this is I believe he was actually recently convicted. And one of the most devastating tragedies. He killed children. And there was a school shooting. And when the SportsCenter feature aired that Sunday morning, there were people that watch ESPN but don't care about esports, who saw that story, and they were parents who lost children during that shooting. Their children died during that shooting, and they messaged him on Instagram and reached out to him and told them how much they cared about him, and they were empathetic about his story. I cannot tell you how much that touched me and changed the way I think about my life and my career, because here's a story about gaming. This is a gamer. He was a pro gamer, and this is his story. And I was able to tell it in a medium that anyone could understand, whether they had ever played a video game or not. And that to me was really important. People may not remember that story, but I do. And it has changed the way I think about my job incredibly, because it's something that there are a lot of stories out there about tragedies, about hardships, people in this industry go through, that you can relate to on just a human level, because you are a human being and you have emotions. So are they, regardless of what they do for a living. So to me, I mean, that's really important.
Oh my God. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So I was gonna ask you, what is the one thing that you remember for all your life, but you just answered it. Let's see. So what do you, like you said, what do you do not during the off season? You do investigative work, right? So do you finish one, continue to do another one, or do you mostly have like 2 or 3 cases doing it at the same time? What is it like?
Yeah, I usually have a few at a time. Right now I'm working on 2 at the same time. One has been really difficult because the off season has actually kind of derailed me. Like I've had to like shift my focus away to produce this show that was on Monday. You know, some of them I don't always have control over. I have some that I like looked into a few years ago and just haven't really gotten very far on. But then, you know, just kind of letting people remember, hey, I was looking into that. So when something happens, they remember, hey, you were looking into that. Let me message him. Let me reach out to him. So, you know, some of them I don't always have control over, and I just have to wait. I just have to be patient to sort of reach a breaking point. But yeah, right now I have 2 that I'm working on. I hope both come out before the end of the year, but one definitely will.
So like, for example, what is the shortest one? Because I imagine each of them would take like months to like finish the story, right? What is the shortest one that you have done? Like maybe like 2 months or 1 month?
God, you know what? It feels like forever. I remember being so frustrated at the time. So I joined ESPN maybe about a month before Renegades and TDK were banned by Riot in the US, and for alleged collusion. And Riot was not very transparent. And I think I would argue, and I think my article showed, that they abuse their power, like in terms of like being the people that, you know, that they allow people to play or have a team in League of Legends or not. And you know, they banned 3 teams. One of them was warranted Team Impulse. They weren't paying people. The other 2, though, TDK and Renegades, were a little bit less. It was opaque, meaning like, you know, the why they were banned was not clear. Riot was not clear, and they were not talking about it. That article to write and report it took me 3 months. That felt at the time in 2016 like an eternity. Now that would be short. One of the ones I'm working on right now has been 6 months. And the one I was talking about earlier with the guy that did all the check fraud and forged documents, that one took 3.5 years. So, yeah, that one was probably the shortest. Maybe there are others I'm not remembering. But yeah. I consider myself lucky if I get one of the big investigations done in like 2 or 3 months.
You're writing a book. I feel like it's like the investigative detective story of esports. Jacob Wolf as a detective.
Yeah, I find this stuff like super fascinating. There's so much material that I like, so much of it I don't have time to get to it all. So that's why I'm like trying to help other people get better at it so they can do it, because I think that's important.
So I'm curious because like most media don't really make profit. So doing your work, how does your media like survive, I guess? Not like in detail, but like how do you like pay your rent or pay your monthly dues on doing this?
Yeah, so Dot Esports, and I believe this is public, so I'm not like, you know, betraying trust here. Dot Esports is profitable and was profitable last year in 2020. And I expect to be profitable this year in 2021. Awesome. You know, enough people read the website that we have advertising programming. That is not because of me, to be clear. I tend to think about journalism in like 2 different types of ways. There's content that drives engagement. A lot of that is like what we would call SEO content, search engine optimization, or optimized content, meaning when, I don't know, let's use Arcane as an example, the new Riot series. There are a lot of people that search on Google, when is the next episode of Arcane releasing? And .esports comes up and they click it, boom. Millions of people read stories like that. And that's, being on top of that is a big part of our business. And I respect the people at our company that do that immensely because they help pay the bills. My work, I would sort of put into the category of like brand credibility and integrity. My work is read by a smaller audience than that, but to me, a very important audience. The people that are very engaged in esports. It's the people that work in the industry, people that advertise in the industry, and doing my type of work sort of goes, hey, we're very serious about what we do here. And it's also just it takes forever. Like I said, I've been working on an investigative piece right now for 6 months. And there are times that it just takes my entire day up because I'm just like, going through documents, hundreds of pages of documents, reading, transcribing interviews that I did, like, talking to as many people as possible about this subject. And it does take a long time. Therefore, I am not producing a lot of content. So the other people that are kind of doing that content that's like really important, the daily stuff, the SEO stuff, those people are the ones paying the bills. Like they're the ones that generating the money for the company. And I appreciate them. I think some writers look down on that type of work. I would like to think I'm humble and thinking that like, it's okay. That's important. That work needs to get done too.
So do you think, because like definitely affect me, so how does this COVID affect the way you do your work? Does it matter to you? Like, does it bother you in a way? Okay.
Mattered to me immensely. I used to travel like 15 days a month. I used to be all over the US, and it's sometimes like in 2018 all over parts of the world. In 2018 I went to, and almost back-to-back trips, London, South Korea, Los Angeles, and London again in the span of 6 weeks. That was my travel schedule. That is insane. Incredibly mentally taxing with that much travel. Not having time to do everything I wanted to do at home, etc. All of that stopped with COVID. I have not traveled for a work trip that wasn't like local or a few hours away in Texas. I've not traveled for a work trip since January of 2020. I had a little bit of time off in February, and then I was set to go to places in March of 2020, and it all got canceled because of COVID. Some of my work is easier to do in person. It's easier to go and have a conversation with someone about something really sensitive when it's not over the phone, and it can be trusted. You can sit with someone and you can go through some documents or some notes or whatever it may be. It's easier that way. But yeah, so it's affected my work a lot, and I miss traveling too. I used to like even though it was really intense sometimes, I miss doing it. It was different. I liked seeing parts of the world. I grew up not well off, and we didn't travel a lot when I was a teenager, and so I didn't get to really see much outside of Georgia, where I was from, or Florida, and sometimes. It was really cool to experience other cultures, Europe, Asia, etc., in a way that I had never had before.
Hopefully it gets over soon. I think it's getting better. So
I'm fully vaccinated. I'm hoping and have had my booster shot. I'm hoping that I get to do more travel soon.
So last question, what do you hope esports media go in the future? How do you think it can help the industry like grow? Because at this point, sometimes they're still viewed as like a secondary thing, like people don't look at it that much into it. They don't put that much seriousness in it. So how do you hope esports media will grow in the future?
Yeah, you're right. It's not taken too serious at times. It does feel like it's there when you need it. If you're a publisher, it's there when you need it, and then when you don't need it, you just ignore it. It's part of why it was really important to me to put out the letter that Ashley Kang and I put out a few weeks ago about Riot and them not being exactly truthful with the media about who could go to Worlds and who couldn't. And to be clear on that situation, like I would have been okay if they told me that the media outlets were going. I would have been upset, but I would have understood. They just didn't tell us. And I felt really upset that they just didn't tell us and told us something else. So, I think video game media generally, not just esports, but esports is a part of that statement, has a long way to go. It is what I was describing earlier. It's hobbyist, meaning like it's people who enjoy the games or enjoy watching, writing about it a lot of the times. That's fine for certain things. But in terms of the investigations and news breaking and everything else that like happens in other areas of journalism, politics, sports, tech, etc. That's really important to me that we have some of that done as well. And it can feel lonely because I don't think there are a lot of people that like doing that work in video games. There's some other colleagues that I speak to from time to time, like some of the people at the Washington Post do a really great job of this. Shannon Lau, I'll give her a comment or a shout out because she's wonderful. And then like Cecilia D'Anastasia at Wired and Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, they're all very good at this. But I would say we are the minority of the journalists in the video game industry. And I think it's really important that it happens more. Part of that, I think, is building businesses that are sustainable, like Esports, that can support that, right? The fact that we have other people doing the other content I described earlier to pay the bills allows for me to be able to do this sort of longer term, bigger project work, because I'm not having to write like I was at ESPN every single day, right? It allows me to kind of focus at the bigger picture and clear my head and think about it. So I think we've got a long way to go as an industry and media. I'm optimistic. It's slowly getting better. But even though like so much money has come into esports in general, media feels like it's lagging behind. Generally, it's not exactly quite there.
Thank you so much for the interview. This was
no problem.
It's just a wow. It's just wow. I don't even know how to like explain this interview, but wow, thank you so much for your content. This is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate it.
Okay.